right. Like magic. It works. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Let's do it again. A little more emphasis now. That was a very cold good evening. Let's try it again one more time. A little more enthusiasm this time. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Much, much better now. So I wish I could describe to you how happy and how grateful I am for being here today with you all. It's been a great weekend. All of our parents here and educators have an amazing conference on Saturday and also yesterday. And here we got a chance to talk about he or him, right? So again, I really wish I could express my gratitude in words and how happy and how ecstatic and enthusiastic I am for being here with you folks today. And with that, I'd like to ask our guardian angels, so may they bless our hearts, may they enlighten our minds so that we can really comprehend his message, his teaching that's been here with us for quite some time. And despite all these 2,000 plus years that his message has been here with us, a lot of us have misunderstood it. So who is Jesus for you? Is he a promised Messiah, as our Jewish brothers and sisters believe? Is he God? Is Jesus a normal human being that just came here and lived like we did? Who is Jesus?
Master.
Oh, a master. Oh, interesting. So, but first of all, if you have any questions and there's something that, we are saying here that you don't really understand or you don't agree, that's definitely on the table. Hey, Flavio, I don't really get the part that you talk. Please raise your hand and say it out loud, right? Our goal here is to learn about this together, right? The only reason why I'm here is because I did the homework. I prepared beforehand. You could all be here with me as well. We all could be talking about Jesus at the same time. So if you have questions, if you have comments, I'm not really sure what you said I understood completely. Please, by all means, speak up, right? Do speak up. So, Master, interesting she said that. What else? What else? If you're asked to describe Jesus, what would you say? Who is he?
Role model.
Role model, okay. It's because he cheated. He wrote the Spirit's book. What? Son of God. Are we all sons or daughters of God? Are we all children of God?
Our brother.
He's our brother, okay. I don't have a brother, I only have a sister. But that means that I can count on him now?
Yes.
To my brother? Okay. What else? Who else? Teacher. That's my favorite. Thank you. That's my favorite. To me, he's a teacher. Because he's taught me so many good things. He's taught humanity so many things, right? That today, the world that we live is divided into what? Before him and after him. He's the most biographed author or character in humanity's history. Excuse me, I can't even speak to it. In humanity's history, over 2 million books were written trying to really describe his life. 2 million books, ladies and gentlemen, 2 million books were written trying to describe his life. Right? So, what do we, as Spiritists, look and see Jesus? Is he the promised consoler? Is he, a teacher? Is he a brother? Is he, what does he do for us? These are some of the things that we're going to see tonight, right? Keep in mind that people all over the world have heard many things about Jesus. Many, many things. Some people may have heard different things. I believe, it's my personal belief that when we look at this with the Spiritist lens, it gives us a totally new perspective into his model or his, dynamics as a Christ. So, let's start. Oh, I know why. I gotta touch the screen. See, you call me on that one. Let's see if it works. Oh, nope.
Yes, it is.
Let me try it again. Maybe I should. Oh, there you go. I think it's working now. Is it working? It's a little slow. So I gotta speak a little slower so the screen can match my speed. So when you look at Jesus, some people call him the Christ. Interesting that I've given this talk many, many times, and nobody ever said Christ. When I said, who is Jesus? Because, by the way, his name is not Jesus Christ, right? That's not a surname. It's not a last name. When you look at Jesus, comma, the Christ, what does that mean? It's a title. It's a title. So it's the title that was given to the reigning Messiah. That means something totally unexpected. Christ means the anointed one. Do you guys know that? Yeah. So if you is it
Like oil?
like oil? Yes. So if you're into baking, who here likes to bake? Most people, right? So if you're into baking, what do you do before you put the dough on a pan, on a tray, before it goes to the oven? You have to do what? You oil, or you anoint, right? The paint or the pan or whichever utensil you're working on. So this was the description that back into the Greeks, right? Back in the days, they used to really describe the Messiah, right? That's what the word Christ means. So if you look, for example, works. The etymological sense of the word Christ comes from the Old English Christ, Latin Christus, and Greek Christos. They all mean the same thing. The anointed one. That one that comes in, right? That's going to really tell us stories or tell us things that we don't know. It's going to really give us the key for the door that's really going to give us a lot of great stuff behind the door, right? So when you look at this, right? Even the disciples had a hard time comprehending his nature or his mission. Because they didn't even see sometimes that he was the Christ. So back to the description. What we understand today is the word Christ means the ideal type of humanity. When you look at Christ, right, the definition that we understand today, in this day and age, is this ideal type of humanity. So let me ask you, what is the ideal type of a soap opera actor? If you good looking, right? So if you grew up in this country, you may remember Fabio. Remember Fabio?
Yes.
The soap opera actor. So long, blonde hair, and that was, see, he was strong, and right? That's the ideal type of a character or a protagonist in a specific TV show. You look at ideal type of humanity. How many roles do we play as human beings? Several roles, right? For example, you are a husband, right? You are a wife. Who are parents here? Raise your hands. Some. Who are children? Raise your hands. Actually, you should raise your hand right now because somebody. You're here, right? So you're supposed to raise your hand. So we're all children, correct? So what is the ideal type of a child? If you're a parent, oh, my child is so, she behaves so well. She's very well educated. She speaks slow. Does that even exist in a child? Mine doesn't. Mine don't. Mine should have 2 volume settings. Loud or sleeping. That's it. No other volume settings. That's the way they are, right? We've been talking about children all the weekend here. That's who they are. So when you look at, again, back to the point, the ideal type of humanity, what does that mean to us? Because it doesn't matter which role I play. If I'm a father, if I'm a husband, if I'm a brother, if I'm a son, if I'm a cousin, if I'm a boss, if I'm an employee, if I'm a student, if I'm a teacher, it doesn't matter which role I play. I should always look for him for inspiration. I should always look up for him. What would Jesus do if he were in my shoes? That's what this means, folks. All right. Thank you so much for your attention. The talk is over. We just look at him. Ideal type of humanity. Yeah, I got about Flavio Zanetti. Yeah, I got it. So yeah, it was good. Is that easy? Probably not so much, right? So let's look at an ideal, humankind. So we're gonna work. So ideal humankind. Maybe you know who this man is. Right? Anybody else knows who this man is? Yeah? So he's the father of analytical psychology. He also talked with Sigmund Freud for the psychoanalysis to be created within psychology, right? The Swiss psychiatrist, he was a very influential thinker, again, father of the analytical psychology, and he's often considered, correct me if I'm wrong here, please, Kathleen, he's often considered the first modern psychology to really study the human psyche, which is by nature religious. He's a researcher. He's the first researcher that stated that the human psyche is fundamentally, by nature, religious. What does that mean? You don't know?
No.
So, without going into too much detail, because I'm not a psychiatrist, neither a psychologist, neither a doctor, right? My field of expertise is totally the opposite. It's engineering and business and so forth. So, he tried to describe, actually he described that every single human being's mind is by nature religious, right? Human beings are created, quote unquote, right? Are designed to believe in something bigger, something larger than what we can see, smell, touch, or sense. That's what he said. All of us. Even if you don't believe in God, per se, an old man, white beard with a cane, I don't need it, by the way. Even if you don't believe in that typical God's model or vision or visual, I should say, right? Maybe believe in something bigger. Right? There are a lot of friends, they're agnostics. They don't believe in God, but they believe in this energy that created the universe. Actually, we believe that in a different way. But it's okay, right? So he was the one who said that. And he goes even further to describe this ideal humankind. That is a combination of two important things. Let me share with you another picture here. Maybe some of you know what this is. What is this? What does that mean, guys?
The opposite.
The opposite. It's a little more than that. That's balance, okay, that's good. Equilibrium.
Polarities.
Polarities. Polarities, like female, male. Oh, he started doing that. His research started with the whole balance, female and male. He goes even further to say, you know what? For me to understand this ideal humankind, I look at Yang, it's animus, it's masculine. One side. The other side is what? Yin, female, and feminine, right? So for the ideal humankind to take place, they have to have both of these connected. Isn't that amazing? He goes even further. For the masculine or the male animus, right? What does he say? He says that you have to have courage, initiative, objectivity. That's mostly found in people that identify themselves as male. Does that mean that you girls don't have that? No, it doesn't. It means that mostly is identified or mostly found by those who are identified as male. On the opposite of that, same thing happens, right? You look at intuition, capacity for love, spiritual wisdom. We guys don't have that? Of course we do. But it's more pronounced, more easily found in women. This is what he described, or he researched, right? So, interesting enough, when he studied this, it's over half a century ago, right? Very recently, about 20 or so years ago, our dear sociology friends have discovered or have really proved that nobody is 100% male and nobody is 100% female, right? It's actually a spectrum. And we navigate through that spectrum based on our lives, based on our upbringing, based on our relationships, and etc. So if you believe that you are, oh, I'm strong, I'm a guy, sorry, there's some female things in you. And if you girls believe you're so like, oh, I'm so gentle, I'm so intuitive, I have all this spiritual wisdom. No, you also have objectivity, courageous, you all that, right? So our jobs as human beings is to do what? If I have a lot of these, none of that, I gotta work on that. If I have a lot of that and none of these, I gotta work on these. And we go, learning a little bit here, a little bit there, progressing, developing, and enhancing, right? That's what he says. But now let me ask you a question back. Who is the one model, the one person that really exercised, that really fit on these two shoes perfectly?
Jesus.
Did you see this before? Have you been in one of my talks before? No, just kidding. It is Jesus. You're right. And I'll give you a couple of examples that can really solidify the message. Jesus as animus, right? As the initiative, as the, if you remember the passage that's in John chapter 2, verse 13 to 25, John describes that there was a time during the Jewish Passover, right? That a lot of people were using the temple as a commerce, trying to sell things into the religious temple. What does he tell them? Hey, please, guys, look, this is a spiritual temple. You're not supposed, he doesn't say that, right? What does he say? He's very energetic. You, get this out of here. Stop running this, turning my father's temple into a market. He say it like it is. He does not sugarcoat it. He tells them straight up, stop turning my father's temple into a market. He's courageous, right? He has the initiative to do that because everybody else didn't. Oh, I'm so afraid I'm going to really say some bad things and this person's going to, no. Right? Sometimes you have to say these things, right? What about the opposite? Can you remember an episode that Jesus is very caring? He's very loving. Shows his spiritual wisdom. The one that comes to me or strikes me the most is when he sees the children and he says something very important. That's in Luke chapter 18, verses 15 to 17. Let the children come to me, because theirs is the kingdom of God. In that small phrase, right, 8 words long, he does what? He says, let the children come to me. It doesn't say, bring the children to me. Some translations have it that way, but it's not right, right? According to what we understand, he said, let the children come to me. Because he didn't want to do our jobs. He didn't teach us that he was going to be here to do our jobs. We still have to do our jobs. Right? And if you think that we are still children from the spiritual perspective, right? We're very young in our spiritual evolution, right? This is only a small chapter of our life. Speaking of which, maybe some of you are old enough to remember the old TV channels where we had TV commercials. Remember that? You do, right? So there's something happening here. I think it's not. Somebody just logged into the meeting. So if you got into, let's say there was a movie playing, right? And then you got back home and you turned on the television and the movie was already on, and you caught that after the third commercial. Would you be able to understand the movie fully? Sometimes? Okay. So let's do a poll. Who thinks yes, you'll be able to understand the movie fully? Raise your hand. 2 people. If you don't think you'll be able to understand the movie fully, raise your hand. Okay, so if you're sleeping, raise your hand because I'm missing some hands. Something's wrong here. The math is not adding up. So, guys, very unlikely you'll be able to understand the entire movie because the first, 5-10 minutes, so the whole action is. Maybe somebody does something and somebody, right? And if you didn't catch that, you may get the movies, drama, maybe the movies, action, or it's fiction, or it's sci-fi, right? You get the idea of the movie, you get the idea of the characters, but you can't get the entire movie story, right? So this is us. This life that we have here, it's only one of our chapters, right? Imagine a Mexican, soap opera that goes on for like 6 months. Maybe you lose the first 3 months, right? Are you going to be able to understand the whole soap? No. That's us. That's our life right now. Full of sometimes issues and complications. And you want a practical story, a practical example? Raise your hand if you have no problems whatsoever in your family. It's not a joke, it's a question. It's a serious question. Raise your hand if you have no problems whatsoever in your family. Nobody does that. I never actually got anybody. So one day, actually, I did once. The guy just raised his hand. I go, oh, one person. Oh, my goodness. Yes. He goes, no. Can I go to the bathroom, please? Because I don't know what that is. That's something I wanted to hear. So, anyways, yeah, but why is that so? Have you guys stopped to think about that? This is what Spiritism teaches us. Because our family members are the ones that, guess what? Back then, we may have done something interesting for them, really bad. Then now we have to, guess what? Really be even with them, right? The accounting has to balance if you're into accounting. So that's why it's difficult, right, to live with people, right? That's why it's complicated sometimes. That's why it hurts when somebody we love does something very bad to us, right? That's why it hurts when somebody does something like, I can't believe that person did this. Because we don't understand the entire movie, the whole soap opera. We only look at one chapter, which is this life. We have had many lives before, and guess what? We'll have many more lives in the future, right? So I look at Jesus, and he says, let the children come to me, because for theirs is destined the kingdom of God. He says, you know what? Let them come to me. They're who are pure of heart, right? They're who are, this innocence, this ingenuity, right? That's what he's asking us to do, to behave like children, right? Because the more you grow up, the more you become an adult, sometimes we develop some habits that are not the best, right? For example, if you're a parent, when your kids were like 3 or 5 years old, they're very straightforward. Daddy, I don't like this. I don't like this gift. Give me something else. Maybe your husband gives you something for your anniversary. Honey, thank you so much. I loved it. I can't believe this understand why I am. Been together for 20 years. He gives me this. I don't like this. Why don't you tell your husband you don't like that, right? So we've developed those situations, and we're not behaving as children anymore, right? So when he said that, let the children come to me, you're saying, you know what? Whenever they're ready, let them come to me, and I'll be there for their spiritual wisdom. I'll be their teacher. I'll be their, pathway towards, the future and so forth. So he actually exemplified those two characteristics or shoes, right? He fit on those shoes perfectly. When you look at, for example, moving forward, when you look at Christ, this ideal type of humanity, there you go, right? So what does that mean for us? What do we learn from Spiritism? What that means, right? Because one thing is to understand what, all the type of humanity from Jung's study or research, right? We get that. But this is what the spirits are telling us. The truly good person, and I'm sure all of us who are here are really trying to become a truly good person, right? Otherwise, we're going to be doing something else, maybe going to the movies and whatever. So the truly good person is the one that complies with the laws of justice, love, and charity. Right? It's right here. But they don't stop there. And usually the complementary, description is the best in my opinion. Because guess what? I think that doing this is good. It's okay, check. Right? But they go further. They say, you know what? In the highest degree of purity. Because you may think that this is justice, but it's in the highest degree of purity. Chances are not, right? Because the way we look into things is based on our bias, right? Based on how we look into the world. It's based on how we interpret a situation. We don't remove ourselves from the situation and try to comprehend that, right? In the highest degree of purity. So it is difficult, right? We know that. It is difficult. Continuing, there's a lot of discussions, even within the Spiritist, researchers, on the nature of Jesus. Was he a human being? Was he an angel? Was he made of special things? Right? Was it this creature that God created that's totally different from anybody else? Right? What we learn from Spiritism is totally the opposite. That he was just like us. Right? He was a somebody in flesh, bones, right? Spirit and paraspirit, like all of us. Even to the point that the Spirit say, you know what? Without prejudging anything. So I don't care what has been told or said before. Without prejudging anything, let us consider him as nothing other than a superior spirit. Right? One belonging to the highest order. So he's a spirit like us, like all of us. He came here, did his duties, and that's it. But they don't stop there. They continue, like always, right? The continuation is where the treasure is hidden. And he said, he was not God himself. Right? But an ambassador of God. A divine Messiah. Flavio, I get this, but my friend goes to this XYZ church, right? And they believe that Jesus is God. They believe, they say it. They do. Are they wrong? So our job is not to judge anybody, but to understand why people behave in certain ways. Why do you confuse him with God? It's very easily comprehensible. Why? Because the way he really acted on earth was very godly, right? Or godlike, I should say, right? Almost perfect. In the way that every single situation, every single opportunity that he had, what did he do? He taught people. He used that for teaching, for giving examples, really taking a situation and reversing that, really motivating others to follow his footsteps. That's why when somebody says he's a teacher, that's to me that resonates the most. He's the teacher, right? He really taught us a lot of great things. Right? So again, not God, but we understand why people, mistakenly see him as God. Because he was God, lowercase g, God-like. And sometimes people confuse, right? When somebody's almost there, they confuse it. And that's totally understandable, right? Is that important? No. The important message is, if you look at what he told us, because if you remember, right, all the 4 Gospels, who remembers that? Who are the 4 Gospels that talked about Jesus? There are only 4. If you look at the Bible, there are 27 books, right? But only 4 of those talk about Jesus' life. Let's see if you did the homework. 4 Gospels. Matthew, John, Luke, Mark. Those are the 4 Gospels. Amongst those 4, there was one of them that never met Jesus in person. Luke. He never met him in person. However, his Gospel is the one that gives us the most interesting details about the life of Jesus. Isn't that amazing? It's pretty amazing. That was the last Gospel that was written. John was the last Gospel that was written when Jesus was still here with us. So if you want to look about how the crucifixion moment and all that, John describes all that. So, question for you. If you're coming here for the first time, anybody coming for the first time into Spiritist Center? Welcome. So you don't see a cross anywhere, do you?
No, I'm not looking for one.
Why is that? Why is that?
Well, to me, I don't need any symbols.
God, awesome.
All I need is them in me.
Awesome.
And that is it.
Awesome.
That's the beginning and the end.
That's
and
great.
I was interested in hearing what you had to say about it.
Absolutely. So the reason why we have any crucifix or any crosses in the Spiritist Center is because the image that we keep of Jesus are his teachings. The moment that he was crucified, what happened? Our brothers and sisters from different, faiths and religions and etc., they believe that's the image that they should keep. And that's okay. We respect that. But we don't keep those because for us, that's not the most important moment of Jesus. It's not. The most important moment of his teachings, and by the way, he lived how many years? 33. How many years did he teach? 3 out of those 33. So out of those 3 years that he taught us, right? Many, many, many different teachings. Those are the things that we should remember. As we learn from Spiritism, right? He's our model and guide. If he's our model and guide, the ideal type of humanity, we have to remember what? The parables. the stories, the teachings, the messages, the comforting message that he's promising us, something better. He's asking us to be good people, to do well, to treat others with respect, to love our God Almighty above all things. And as we develop that love, to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. So that is the message. So if you have that here, you don't need a crucifix. You don't need an amulet. You don't need nothing. You need nothing in order to really tune yourself, or to really turn into the old knob, right? The radio that my frequency I'm going to listen to, that's the frequency we should be listening to. That's why we don't have any rituals in Spiritist centers. We have no images. No. What's important to us is the message, the teachings, the reading, the understanding of he promised us something, right? When he promised us something, what did he say? There you go, right? The human being. He promised us things using simple stories. He talked to fishermen. He talked to those that nobody else wanted to talk to, right? The crooks, the prostitutes, everybody else, right? He was a human being like all of us are. Right? Simple, always looking for an opportunity to teach, to grow, to demonstrate. No, he was here to do. However, we understand that, a lot of things have changed throughout the history of humankind. A lot of, selfish behaviors from one part, different part that changed the message, so to speak. But, right, as a man, he was just a carpenter. He did his duties, right? Worked with his father, right? He just had the same body that we all have, right? Nothing's changed. Nothing is different there, right? So as we look from his superiority over humans, was completely from a spiritual nature, right? His physical or spiritual body, perispirit, we call him, spiritual body, was drawn from the most quintessential, really enlightened portions of Earth's energy. And that's why he was able to really control nature. That's why he was able to say, stop raining. Because his composition was really aligned with nature. Right? He was able to do that. Does that mean that we'll eventually have the possibility to do that? Yes, we will. All of us. Even if you don't believe in Jesus. Isn't that amazing? Even if you don't even think about it at all. Because his message, right? He didn't leave a religion. He didn't leave. No, he didn't. I'll tell you one thing that I read on a friend of mine's Twitter one time. He said, the greatest thing that Spiritism did to me, it taught me that God has no religion. Isn't that amazing? God has no religion. He doesn't, right? God doesn't. Interesting. So, continuing. Come on. Let's go. Go. There you go. So, let's talk about Jesus the medium, right? And here, the medium, what are we trying to say? Medium is the person that can really become this, right? Intermediary between the spiritual world and the physical world, right? We learn from Spiritism that we're all mediums. Because we all have the ability to really, through intuition, through, getting close to our loved ones, to really feel that. A lot of us feel it. Some people more than others, right? Some people have this mediumship more, developed than others. There's several, different capabilities, but him as the medium, right? Was he a typical medium that was really receiving messages? Let me ask a different question. So if you're a medium, let's say you work here, you study, you go do all the studies in the center, you develop yourself, intellectually, spiritually, and you started in the mediumship teaching or lessons or classes, right? And you're allowed to study and all that. So when you receive messages, sometimes they come from enlightened spirits, right? Spirits that are like our mentors, our guides, our benefactor spirits. They're giving us maybe some ideas. Hey, you should think about this. You should think about that. Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? They're giving us these messages for us to really wake up sometimes, right? So if he was the medium, who was he receiving messages from? Who said that? God? Look how interesting that is. So he received a different input. That's not the typical mediumship that we're used to. Because imagine, right? If there had to be a higher spirit giving him ideas or maybe intuition or messages, he had to come only from God, right? Good one. Continuing, he was a medium of God. And that's why he was in constant connection with our Creator. Is it a question, comment? You don't agree?
A question.
Go ahead.
I'm just like, can you really consider him a medium? Because I think
Absolutely. He was the greatest medium of all times.
in medium.
He was able to really get the message from our Creator in a way that translated that into put into practice.
But
Remember my topic before when he was like this? What does he do? His last words, God, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing. He's talking to God constantly. He's exchanging communication with God constantly, right?
Yeah,
That's mediumship.
Yeah, because the wisdom comes from his spirit, right? It's not so.
It's his wisdom,
Yeah.
right, as an immortal spirit like we all are. But when he was getting this messages, right? He was communicating with
God.
something even higher, right? Does that help?
Yes.
So let's bring down to earth. Let's flip the side of that. So let's look at Jesus as the psychotherapist, right? And there's a story there that it's in the Gospel according to Spiritism, and there's also this book here by Dr. Mark Baker called "Jesus, the Greatest Therapist Who Ever Lived." The greatest therapist. Have you read this book? I see some smiles. So it's an amazing book because he teaches us, right, all the great things that Jesus did as a therapist. And by the way, it's not only the therapist, right? I can go further and further. There's several studies today, in this day and age, that show that if you are a leader, if you own a company, if you have employees, if you are a servant leader, you have way more chances of success. Way more chances. Servant leadership comes from him. He was also the greatest leader of all times. Only now, it took us 2,000 years to really acknowledge that, right? People are really catching in that if you're a leader, what do? You serve your people. You help your employees. You develop them. You teach them. You coach them. You guide them. You push them up, right? That's what you do. That's what he did to all the disciples. All the time. Constantly trying to push them up. Peter, don't do this. Don't do that, right? And so forth. James, don't do that. So, if you look at the word therapio, right, means to heal, to wait upon, or to serve. So the greatest therapist is the one that serves the most. It's the one that says, you know what? Let me wait upon you. So I see some movement on your side, then I can give you the medication. Right? Oftentimes, in all his 27 times that he cured or healed somebody that we have knowledge of, that's in the Gospels, out of those 27 times, does he go towards the patient? Never. Right? He waits for the patient to have a proactive approach, say, you know what, I need some help. Jesus, I need some help. Right? And people touch him, they go after him, and what does he do? Okay, so now you're asking me to help you. Now you're asking me to heal, to cure you. I'll do my job. And even when he did all his 27, healings, right? What does he say?
You can cure yourself.
Your faith has cured you, has healed your wounds. Go and sin no more. He never said, yeah, I cured you, yeah, no. He said, your faith has healed you. Go out there, keep you up here with your life, but please sin no more. That's what he did, right? So him as a therapist, the very best that ever existed, right? Because if you're in health sciences, and if you don't try to heal somebody, if that person doesn't want to be healed, can you do your job?
No.
Well, sometimes you can, but it's way more difficult. Way more difficult, right?
You can even try, but sometimes they don't internalize
Exactly. So you can give the medication, you can prescribe, you can do all those things, therapy. If the person's not ready, it doesn't work, right? So he waited until people were ready to be healed based on their merits, based on, we all know that, right? It's not, by the way, not everybody that came to Jesus got healed. Do you guys know that? Some people came to him and he didn't heal them. Because as we understand from Spiritism, back then, they did not deserve it yet, right? So we know that. If you look, for example, right, it's not the healthy that is a doctor, but the sick. And he was constantly working and spending time and talking to those who were sick. Sick in the physical way, sick in a spiritual way. Right? That's what he did. Right? So if you translate all that, what we've said so far, and you look at him as the perfect model, right? What do we get? To me, this is one of the most beautiful questions from the Spirit's book, 625. And Allan Kardec, in his entire enlightenment, opportunity, he said, he asked the spirits, look at this, what's the word I'm looking for? Look at the intelligence of this question, right? What is the most perfect example that God has offered us as a guide and model? He's asking the spirits, who are the most perfect example that God has offered us as a guide and model? And the official answer is, see Jesus. See Jesus. But when he said, if you remember, right? When he said, I'm the path, I'm the way, I'm the truth, a lot of people believed what? Oh, so I have to understand Jesus. I have to follow him. I have to call myself a so-and-so that follows Jesus. And that's why I'm done. My job is done. What we learn from Spiritism is that it's not enough. Right? It's not enough. It doesn't matter what you call yourself. You can call yourself an atheist for what matters. What matters is the charity, the loving that you provide to others. Right? So if you rewind our own lives, maybe an incarnation ago, right? We were only religious when? Sunday mornings. Right? What do? We put our best clothes on, put our best smile. We went to this temple, this church, whatever we want to call it, right? We'll listen to this sermon, and then once it was done, we drank something, we ate something, and we went back home. We had slaves, we beaten our wives, we beaten our children, we treat people badly. That's what we did, folks. That was us, not too long ago. But what do we learn from the Spiritism? It doesn't cut it anymore. It doesn't. What we have to do is follow him, right? In his own footsteps. What would he do if he were in my shoes? If you go back and look at his mission, what was he on earth to do, right? There's a famous quote from one of the most prolific mediums of all times. He's one of the greatest writer of all times. If you consider the books that he published, 427 books he published, and he didn't get any cent from the proceedings of those books. It's the Brazilian medium, Francis Xavier. And what he says, he's right here, right? 96 years of age. What he said was, Jesus did not ask us much. He did not even demand that people climb the Mount Everest or make huge sacrifices. He just asked us to love one another. Just asked us to love one another. That's it. Did he ask us to be perfect? No. Just love. And guess what? Make a mistake today? I'm sorry. Try it again. Dust it off. Try it again. Right? That's what he asked us to do. He didn't ask us to get a PhD from Harvard. No, he didn't. Because guess what? Not everybody gets a PhD from Harvard, correct? Yes, that's correct. Well, he didn't ask us to speak 27 languages. No. He just asked us to love one another. And everything else will fall into place. Right? if you look at his role, like he talked to a lot of people, right? We know, we can go back to the Gospels and try to really understand his moral authority by the example that he provided. We get all that, right? But the thing that's really interesting, at least when I look at this, when I see it, right, that he was not like a moralistic lawgiver. Oh, you do this and you do that, and then he wasn't, right? He just wasn't. What did he do? He treated everybody with respect. I call him the first feminist of all times. He was. Right? The very first one that really acknowledged and saw the role of women play in societies even back then. Right? If you look at what he actually meant by some of the phrases that he used, it's really incredible. He was way ahead of his day and age, as we know it. Right? And of course, now, thanks to Spiritism, we have the understanding the Spirits are telling us. Yeah, that is true. Right? So he came to fulfill the prophecies that Anna had announced he's coming. His authority, that he was just the Messiah and all that, derived from the exceptional nature of his Spirit and his divine mission. To really give us the list of teachings, give us really some of the great things that he was promised us and so forth. Right? We know, thanks to Spiritism, that his role as the spiritual governor of earth, right? It's in a book called In the Way to the Light by the Spirit Emmanuel. In that book, there's an interesting paragraph that I'll bring into its entire form. The traditions of the spiritual world tell that in the guidance of all phenomena in our solar system, there's a community of pure spirits selected by the Supreme Lord of the universe. In their hands reside the directing guidelines of life for all planets. So what he does for us, there are other Jesus out there doing for other planets as well. And this is not sci-fi. It's not like science fiction. It's logical, right? It makes sense. We know that we're not the only ones that have life in the universe. If you disagree, only the Milky Way. Does anybody know how many suns are there in the Milky Way that we have discovered up to today? How many suns? Alexa, how many suns are in the Milky Way? It's not Alexa, I'm sorry. How many suns are in the Milky Way? Over 100,000 suns. Yeah, 100,000. Only Milky Way. Only one galaxy. So if you look at the whole size of the universe, makes total sense to have other planets that are inhabited, right? Makes total sense. And he is our governor. But there are other spirits like him that have these functions and roles in different planets. But here's the community of angelic and perfect beings, of which Jesus is one of its members, only one of its members, right? Had already met twice the proximities of Earth for the solution of decisive issues in the organization and direction of our planet. So think of him as the president or the really the leader of our planet. The curious thing is, this book was written in 1939, right? I think there's a age here, year here. Oh, yeah, 1938. I'm sorry, 1938. On the Way to the Light. So can you tell me what was about to happen? Second World War. So this book talked about decisive issues in the organization of our planet that was about to happen. Right? Once again, we learn through Spiritism, right? All these ideas. So it's not a prophecy. Oh, you guys did us. No, it's not. Right? But at least makes sense. This is the logic of Spiritism, folks, right? That we learn. So, to really ask the important question, how to understand his teachings and his life examples? How can we do that? We can go back and read the Bible from cover to, yeah, we can do that. We can talk to people that study Jesus. We can read some of his biographies, right? But let's look for someone that wasn't even someone that called himself a Christian. Let's look at Gandhi, for example. Gandhi was a Hindu. He was a Hinduist preacher, right? That didn't even follow Jesus. And he says, this is the paragraph that he says. He says something very interesting. He goes by saying this: of all the things I have read, what remained with me forever was that Jesus came almost to give a new law. Not an eye for an eye, but to receive 2 blows, and only one was given. And to go 2 miles, and the rest to go 1. Next time your boss asks you to report, you do 2 reports. Next time your trainer asks you to run 10 miles, you run 20 miles. That's what being Jesus-like is, right? Joking. You get the idea, right? I came to see that the Sermon on the Mount was the whole of Christianity for him who wanted to live a Christian life. It is that sermon that has endeared Jesus to me. Because if you remember the Sermon on the Mount, what happens? There's somebody there that's sick on the side of the road, right? Guys, do you remember that Sermon on the Mount? Yes? No? A little bit? So there's a guy that was sick on the side of the road. The first person that came, who was it? No.
No. The
Pharisee, right? So the Pharisee said, I get it, okay. Didn't help him. The second person that came, who was it? It was a religious person. Like a priest or preacher, whatever, right? It was a religious person. What does he do? Nothing. Walked away. The third person was a Samaritan, right? What does he do? Took care of him, healed, and all those things, right? So that's the message, right? It doesn't matter what labels you have. It doesn't matter what titles you have. It doesn't matter what you call yourself. When you see somebody that needs some help, right? Practice charity. We learn from Spiritism that without charity, nothing happens. Allan Kardec is very precise when he says, without charity, there's no salvation. And salvation not in the term of, salvation is our moral or spiritual growth, right? For us to be better, for us to grow as spiritual beings that we all are, we have to be charitable. We have to look at other brothers and sisters of human beings like brothers and sisters. It doesn't matter if they don't look like us. It doesn't matter if they don't even talk like us. Nothing matters because we're all children of God, right? Then when we see, for example, some of the most important message that he said, right? That he said, you, right, shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. All that. You should love your neighbor as yourself. This is the calling. This is the message. This is the invitation. It's not asking us to put this weird hat on. He's not even asking us to say it. No. Let them be what they want to be. You follow this. Because if you do, right, there's a huge connection between the teachings and the teacher. And as we learned from Gandhi, right, he was the one that really bridged that gap between the teachings and the behavior. What he said, he acted on it. He really walked the talk. Was he a religious leader? You could say that. Yeah. Was he a human being that really changed the world? You could say that too. Right? Was he God? No, we don't believe he was God. We understand he was not God, right? What he was for us, he's a teacher. What he was or he is for us is the model and guide as we learn through Spiritism. And if we follow his footsteps, if we understand his message, right? And sometimes, it's difficult. The Gospels were written 2,000 years ago and different languages, translations and all that. We have the Spirit's book that can help us, right? Questions and answers. We have the Gospel according to Spiritism that gives us really the nutshell of those teachings, right? They're all there, right? So when we look at that and we really try to really study, get to know, right? What is Spiritism? We saw that yesterday, right? It's the science that deals with the nature, origin, and destiny of spirits and the relationship with the incorporeal world. It's not a cult. It's not a religion. It's not. What we do here is what? We study. We read. We get to know these teachings. And most importantly, hopefully this has been an inspiration for you to leave that door and follow one teaching of his. Right? For you to at least look and be that light of the world that we all are. to our spouses, to our children, to our parents, to our neighbors, to our friends, to our family. Is it easy? No. It's hard. But that's what he invited us to do. Right? He did. And that invitation comes with what? Comes with a lot of great things in the future. Right? So we look at Jesus once again, right? What do we see? He's the best model and guide. Not the only one, but the very best, as we understand. This is the message that we learn from Spiritism. And whoever desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross, his difficulties, his shortcomings, and all that, and follow me. This is the invitation. Thank you for your time and your attention. It's been a great pleasure. And if you have any questions, I'll be delighted to try to answer them. If I don't know the answer, I'll do my best to research and I'll give you that afterwards. How about that? Thank you. How do you know time?
You're good on time. Okay.
So Jesus was the most pure spirit of earth. Were there not any other spirits higher than him?
No, not higher, no. As you understand, he's the governor of our planet, and there wasn't any other higher spirits than him. There were, however, other enlightened spirits that gave us a lot of different messages, like some of the prophets, right? Buddha or Muhammad, all those spirits, even some philosophers, some researchers, right? Because oftentimes you see, you know what? They have to be religious. No, they don't. Right? There are a lot of folks out there, they're transforming the world. They may not even call themselves religious, right? Like Carl Gustav Jung. He transformed psychology, right? So when you look at these folks, they are definitely guided, right? They're definitely working towards a betterment of human society in general, right? So not higher than him, but definitely a lot of other spirits that were here came with that mission to really enhance or augment our understanding, knowledge, and etc. Right?
So all the other governors and all the other planets and all the universe,
I don't know, to be honest.
That's what I'm saying.
So in that message from On the Way to the Light, he mentions that other spirits, the same level as him, right? Or guide the other planets.
Sure.
That's in the message.
Sure.
But not on Earth.
Sure.
Different
No,
planets.
yeah.
Right? That's the message that we got.
Ask some questions, people. Questions.
So when you say that the magnetism from Jesus came directly from God, why do you say that and you do not say perhaps that came from higher spirits?
That's a great question. So the way we understand, because of his, imagine the scale of evolution, right? He was a semi-perfect spirit already, or pure spirit already. None of him to get enlightened messages from another spirit that was higher than him, right? There was no scale that can really fit somebody else there. In our own understanding. Is that true and set in stone? Definitely not. But from our own comprehension and very small understanding, that's what we believe, right? That's what we understand from a logical perspective. Question?
Yes. This is something that has come over and over, so I want to hear your opinion. I understand, connected to his question, that God is a name that we chose to give, and it's well known to a higher spirit or whatever it is that we choose to call, depending on our religion or belief, or God. When we read over and over that we need to love the Lord God, or whatever it is, that name, and you are a person that is loving a higher spirit, how do you translate loving something that you don't have an image, you don't have, it's intangible?
It's abstract. So I think, if I understand correctly, the question is, how do you love, for example, God, that you have no way to describe him, right? Versus maybe you could love Jesus, or maybe somebody higher spirit, and you have some affinity, some inspiration, right? Is that what the question was?
Yeah, I just don't want to get the wrong idea that it's not how, but like, it is how, but it's,
okay.
I'm not denying the love, I just wanted to understand it better.
Okay, so as we learn from Spiritism, God's not a spirit, right? Because spirit has a moment of creation, right? God doesn't have the moment of creation, right? Also, there's not a lot of gods, because there are many gods, they will be fighting, right? That's the Greek mythology. They're always fighting for something and all that. So as we believe God is not a person, as we believe from Spiritism, God is the creator of the universe, the supreme intelligence of all things. Can we fully comprehend God? No, we can't. It's like when let's say you have a computer right now, and the computer is from 1998. That computer has Windows X, maybe Windows 95. 95, right?
Windows 98?
Windows 98, exactly, thank you. So would you be able to put Windows 10 in that computer? No, right? Because it was just limited. So our comprehension is very limited still. Yeah, we've done this and we've done, but still very limited. How can we comprehend God? By his attributes, right? Through studying his attributes, we can have an idea of God, perfect, just, kind, nature, right? Omnipresent, everywhere, all those things. I personally, right, when I raise my thoughts, when I pray, what do I figure, what do I image? Jesus. Right?
Yeah.
And by the way, that's even the image that we were told, or we were taught. He has long hair, blue eyes. Science today tells that very unlikely he had blue eyes. Very unlikely. Right? That's the image that we were told. Right? So what do? I picture that because I can connect to it. So my emotions go straight to it. That works for me. Some people say, you know what? When I pray, I remember I visualize a lake, a mountain, because I love nature. I hug trees. That works too. Right? That's totally fine. So the way, specifically on love, the way I see love is a very sophisticated feeling, right? That for you to experiment love, right? It's it requires some development. So, for example, psychology today tells us that our children, right, young children, they can only love us if they first respect us and they see that we're there to help them, right? So, sorry to tell you, but your 5-year-old might not love you as much as you think he or she does. Because there's some prerequisites in place. The way I see it is, for us to love God, the same analogy, for us to love God, we have to develop that. So I start with Jesus, right? That works for me. I work different for different people, right? So that's what I do, right? So love is a very sophisticated feeling. I want to leave you with that. That it takes practice. It takes understanding what that is. And if you really want to know the closest resemblance of the love that God has for us, is the love that your mother had for you, or mothers have for their children in general, right? Because they love them without asking anything back. Even I'm a father, I love my children, but it's not the same. The connection is not the same. I love them to death. They're daddy's girls. When they're sick, they're with their mother, right? So that loving connection that a mother has with their child, right? That's what resembles the most the love that God has for us. And we should also think about that. A love that we don't wait for anything in return. We don't ask for any reciprocity. We just love. That's why you go to, for example, to penitentiaries or to jails. You only see mothers there. Mostly are mothers visiting their sons or daughters or inmates because they don't judge. They still love their children no matter what. You have a question or comment? Please.
I had a comment.
Please.
She was asking, how does she know God? So God is love. God is the glue. Love is the glue that keeps us all one. And so when you think of God, what I do is I have always breathed him. And it's when you do that, it's a fire within you that the faith is so strong that you could burn. This is the way it feels. So God and Jesus are one entity because, they're different. Jesus was here on the earth and all that, but we are all part of God. We're all spirits. We're all one. He said that we would do, or we can do what he did and what he does.
Much more.
And we can. And if we have the faith, we can do faith, love, service, and there was one more thing. When you have those four, there is grace You are in a state of grace. And when you are in a state of grace, you can do anything because you're one with him. And that's where we're going.
I agree. That's beautiful.
So
yeah.
That
is beautiful. Thank you for sharing. It's beautiful. Yeah, and by the way I personally see it, right? It's individual, right? So the way you do that, right? It's up to you and the guy out there. So for example, I'll share with you what works for me. I don't oh God, please enlighten my steps. And if I'm not going to something very difficult, I say, God, I need like a Volkswagen bus, yellow blinking lights so I can see it. Because men usually don't see things, right? Let's be honest. The wives out there, right? Your husbands don't see things. Have you heard about that before? So we men have this difficulty that sometimes, please help me. So I go straight to the source and I ask for it. That works for me, right? I need some like bold letters, blinking yellow, so I can see it, right? But each has its own way of doing it, right? Of communing, of praying, of loving God, of loving nature, of loving others, right? One thing I'll tell you for sure, the more you love your neighbors, the more you really develop that potential for loving your neighbors, right? The more you'll be able to love yourself and love God. That's without a doubt. So each one of us has its own way of doing it, its own stage, understanding, comprehension. That's fine, right? That's fine, totally fine.
I have a little comment. I used to feel guilty because I used to hear you need to pray for God and you have to love God. And I used to feel guilty because I could not understand. And to me, I didn't have that connection until I understood that I'm not there yet. I cannot understand. And I feel close to Jesus because it's so when I pray for Jesus.
Yeah, so each person has its own way of doing it, right? What else, guys? I'm sure there are some questions. More comments.
I want to share a story.
Please.
You said how you asked him for whatever it is. A few years ago, I have some property up in Lake County, and my property was full of stuff. Because I'll buy things, put it in. Buy things, put it. Couldn't walk through. I said, "You gotta help me because I can't even walk through." I was robbed. So when I got a call that I was robbed, I could not get mad because I knew.
Yeah.
So anyway, so then the other story is very recent. About 4 weeks ago, I was sitting paying bills, and my husband is ill right now. And when you said the effeminate man, that's my husband. He accepts everyone. So anyway, I'm paying bills and there isn't any more paycheck coming in. And I said, I need a chunk of money. 2 weeks later, my house at the lake, a different house, burned down.
Oh my goodness.
However, and I knew because my house was the only one on that street, on my street, and I have another one down the street, so I had two there. And there were 150 homes burned up in the sulfur fire. And I knew, and I was feeling guilty because I asked and he provided me. And we got a hell of a check already.
Yeah, so
that's how he works.
It's interesting you mention this because
one word.
So sometimes we are so naive that we ask for something, we're not really waiting for an answer. We want the answer that corroborates, that really matches our own preconceived understanding of what's better for us. I was going to get there.
Good for all.
It has to be genuine, right? Genuine in a way that really asking for something. That really helps you, right? That's amazing. Thank you for sharing.
Not selfish.
Selfish. You're spot on. Yep.
Thanks for sharing.
I just love
Any more questions, folks? So I know that we are maybe a couple of minutes between you and food, so I don't want to wait. I'm just kidding. So let me know if I can help with anything else. It's been a real pleasure. Oh, there's a question.
What took so long for us to learn about the Spirit?
What took too long for us to learn about Spiritism? I don't know, to be honest. I think what we learned from Spiritism is that humankind wasn't ready. Right?
Yeah.
So as we learn from the parables, now that we have the Spiritist lens, I can truly comprehend this. Before I didn't. So give a quick example that may help you solidify that, right? So there's a passage that Jesus said, he decides to leave his mother and go have dinner with the disciples. And he was asking, how come you're leaving your mother alone and you're having dinner with the disciples? That's not fair. I mean, she's your mother, right? And he teaches us the concept of what? Those that are with me are for me, right? The concept of a spiritual family. The concept that now you understand that sometimes you are way more connected with a friend than with a brother, or with a parent, or with a son for that matter. So now we understand, thanks to Spiritism, the concept of universal family, or spiritual family. We have way more affinity, right? But that's not sometimes blood related. That would have been a catastrophe if he said in those words back then. Because people back then were very tight, very connected with their origin. The 11 tribes of Israel, right? So if you're part of the tribe, you have one way of doing business. If you're not, you're not. That's it, right? So back then, humanity wasn't ready to understand this, right? That's why I believe, my personal belief, right, is that it took 1,800 years for us to develop the Enlightenment phases, our intellectual, capabilities and all that. Right? So no, sorry, no time. No, just kidding.
If there is anything on Spiritism that says why he came on that moment, why not wait like 1,800 years?
Why Jesus came at that moment?
Yes.
Because it was a crucial moment for humankind. If you remember back then, when he was coming, the world was pivoting to a very bad place, right? So when Moses came, he taught the Jewish people, one God, right? One entity as of 35 different gods and all that. So they taught us that was the first revelation. When he came, the world was taking a turn for the worst, right? It was important for him to come to really pass that message and tries to pivot, right, how humankind really behaved after that. As we learn from the Genesis according to Spiritism, right, there was a very specific moment in humankind history that needed, right, him to come here and give us that message, right? And that message was going to be with us forever and ever. As we learn from Spiritism, it's a different interpretation of that message, right? A way that removes the rituals, the allegories, the fantasies that, for whatever reasons, right, before, folks put in to change that. I'll give a great example. Before Gutenberg developed the printing machine, right, the Bibles were only stored in the Vatican. Nobody else could read Bibles.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how it was. Right? So people didn't have access to these things, right? They could only get what? Go to the Catholic churches, listen to the priests doing the service, the mass. They would learn from it, right? So then humankind was developed enough, could read, could really rationalize it, intellectualize it, and printing and all that. So it's difficult to answer these questions specifically, but the way we understand, right? Everything happens for a reason in the world, right? The timing that these things happen, right? The specific reason for that. And for him specifically, humankind is taking a turn for the worst. That was important to him to come in and pivot back to its course, right? If anybody has a different opinion or comment, by all means, you're welcome to share. She's learning. All right, so guys, thank you so much for your time. Right? Thank you for the opportunity once again. Mirchis for the hey, you're gonna be here. Just come on, stop in. Thank you for the prompt invitation. It's always a pleasure to spend some time with you folks, right? And also, it's a privilege, more of a responsibility to talk about this man that really transformed humankind.
Thank you.
Thank you. So with that in mind, if you feel comfortable, let's close our eyes. And let's do a little bit of a visualization. First, let's breathe in. Trying to relax our muscles, sitting comfortably in our chairs. And in one thought, in one voice, would like to thank you, our teacher, our beloved Christ, for all your teachings, for all your time, for all the life that you've spent with us, for all your messengers that have shared with us your ultimate story of love and forgiveness. We can almost see you, our Lord. We can almost see you, our dear brother and sister. Jesus coming from that wall, coming from the door, and embracing all of us. Sitting here in the middle of this place, looking at each and every one of us. And we can sense that you understand our deepest needs, our most important desires and wishes, our challenges, problems, also our opportunities. And with that, we'd like to thank you for giving us the teachings, the gospel, the messengers, but most importantly, I'd like to thank you for your love. Because we know that you're always here with us. We know that you're always with us, no matter where we are, in our own lives, in our own families, 24 hours a day. And we can rely and count on you for intuition, for assistance, for guidance, and for help. And if we could ask our dear Jesus, take this prayer and send to our Father and Mother God, the creator of the universe, first in gratitude for this opportunity that we've had to gather amongst friends, to learn about your life. And if you could ask even more, may our loving Father and Mother God protect us, even guide us, help us really become better or more tuned in with your teachings, with your gospel. May your instructions, dear Jesus, be the compass, the GPS that really guide our lives. And with that in mind, like once again, to thank you and to ask you to stay with us forever and ever. So be it. Amen.
Amen. So one more time, thank everybody for coming here. And I would say thank you for Flavio for this beautiful speech talk. And now you can have a social time and some food.
Sure.